Hello again, and welcome to a Smart Community webinar series again. We are with you today with another webinar, which is our 29 of the series. This volume talk about women in tourism, exploring challenges and emerging opportunities. The webinar is going to be moderated by Ayla Cortez. Ms. Ayla is an adjunct faculty and research manager from Asian Institute of Management in the Philippines, and she has relevant research in the field of gender and tourism. She's also a senior consultant at Warwick and Rogers, and she served as intern at the National Green Growth Policy. We have Ayla and his team today to tell us about the topic that they have prepared for us. It's going to be a very exciting webinar, and we are expecting your active participation as the SCoT followers always. Before we start the webinar, I would like to ask the lead curator of SCoT, Professor Jafar Jafari, to enlighten us with an opening remark. Professor Jafari, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Qasim, and good day to everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As Dr. Qasim said, this is the 29th volume of SCoT webinar series. Actually, it's more than 29. We have a satellite series as well, which deals again with a small community, but in a different context. So as you can see, we have a commitment to the subject of a small community in all of these topics and respects. Today's topic is very exciting, very important. It's all opportunities that are waiting for us. It's an opportunity that the sheer volume of it has been there, but we have not really focused on it. And I hope we begin to pay more attention to it. I recall when I started teaching myself many years ago, 25% of my students were female and 75% were male. And now 75%, 80% are female, and the minority are now male. So the balance has really changed, and this is exciting. I'm here to learn myself about this situation and all the opportunities this offers to us. The example I just gave signifies that we are talking about women in management. If so many universities have so many female students, it means we are talking about management. Many people think that women in tourism do not have high-level jobs. Of course they do, because with all this education, that's where they go. They go to the top. So I'm very excited to be with you, to learn from the discussion that we are going to have, and also looking forward to the avenues or opportunities into the future that it opens to us. Welcome again. I will be with you to learn. Thank you very much, Qasim, and thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thank you, Professor Jafari. And now it's time to give the floor to Ayla and see how she architects today's program for us. Ayla, the floor is yours, and we are excited to hear from you and your team.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Qasim and Professor Jafari, for the very generous introductions, and of course for the organizers of SCoT for allowing me to take part in this initiative. So again, mabuhay, magandang hapon, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to our speakers and guests from across the globe. I am Ayla Gutierrez, coming from all the way from Manila, Philippines. And again, it is an honor to moderate this panel comprised of our distinguished speakers. So this panel was organized against the backdrop of exploring the gender dimensions of tourism. We believe that it is high time to bring back gender at the forefront of discussions on tourism management and development. And again, just a bit of a background, we've seen a lot of reports and researches from various international organizations and academic institutions that basically highlights that in most regions of the world, women make up the majority of the tourism workforce, approximately comprising about 54% of the tourism workforce. And arguably, tourism provides great potential for women, where women are benefiting from the many new employment and entrepreneurial opportunities created by the industry. But despite this, however, in many places, institutional and systemic barriers in the form, for example, of gender wage gap, gender stereotypes, among other issues, remain prevalent across the industry, be it in the hotel, restaurant, even down to the destinations and communities. And our own realities point out that women tend to be concentrated sometimes in the lowest paid and lowest status of jobs in tourism. Especially emphasized in this pandemic is that women perform a huge amount of unpaid work in family and in tourism businesses. So in this webinar, we aim to address these gender-based issues in tourism. And today we hope to shed light on some of the questions, such as, does tourism really empower women? And if that is so, how and in what ways? And how can the industry advance gender equality? And for example, what are some of the opportunities that women can be active agents and enablers of tourism development? So for this webinar, we will look at gender in various perspectives, specifically in terms of empowerment, water, entrepreneurship, and communities, environment, and in the wider fields of tourism. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our distinguished members of the panel. So what will happen is I'll introduce them first before their presentation. So our first speaker today is Dr. Stroma Cole, all the way from the University of West of England, Bristol, United Kingdom. Dr. Cole is a senior lecturer in tourism geography. She combines her academic career with action research and consultancy, most recently looking at tourism and water inequality in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia, Tamarindo, Costa Rica, and Kerala, India, and Bali, Indonesia. Dr. Cole has undertaken gender and empowerment work for UNCTAD, a qualitative evaluation of post-tsunami work in Sumatra for the UNDP, and community-based tourism research and training for the FCO in Mexico and for the EU in Rwanda. She was the chair of Tourism Concern from 2007 to 2011. It is a charity promoting ethical tourism. Dr. Stroma will talk about gender, empowerment, tourism, and water. So here, Dr. Stroma, the floor is yours. You may start sharing your screen.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. One little correction. I am now at the University of Westminster and the director of a charity called Equality in Tourism, which is dedicated to improving women in tourism's, the life of women in tourism, and exploring gender and tourism. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are. Thank you for having me, SCoT webinars. I'm very excited to be here. And as introduced, I'm going to talk to you about gender empowerment and water rights. And I hope you will understand that those three things are intimately interconnected, and we need to consider them together as a whole. I'm going to say a little bit about what I mean by empowerment, because I think that's really important. And I'm going to talk about water rights before I hopefully link them together for you to understand why they are so linked up. So to start with, empowerment has been seen by many in four different types: as economic empowerment, which is the kind of empowerment that most of the international tourism organizations, UNWTO, WTTC, etc., understand empowerment as psychological empowerment, social empowerment, political empowerment. But what I think empowerment is about is identifying and redressing power imbalances and giving women autonomy to manage their own lives. I think empowerment is about resisting oppression and having the agency to have a role in public life, to be able to make things happen. I think it's about having the authority to be respected, to be listened to be looked up to, and to have ownership over your own choices. Women's empowerment is not only vital to sustainable development, but it's also vital for the realization of human rights for everyone in society. And if I just give a little bit of background on water rights, and particularly its connection to tourism, right? So the human right to water says that water must be sufficient, accessible, affordable, and safe. What we do know, and there's plenty of research which shows this now, that in many places hotels overuse local water supplies, and when they do so, they compete with local residents, very frequently pushing up the prices of water, which makes the water far unaffordable to many people, and certainly above the 3% income, which is 3% of their income. And some of the women that I've worked with, 30% of their income is going on buying water. For others, they are being forced into exploitative labour because of the need to buy water. And for other women, they're unable to work. They're unable to work because they've got to wait at home for when the tap finally drips, so they can collect those drips in sufficient quantities over a short period of time, because they don't know when the water's going to run again. They have to queue for many hours for water supply, or they have to walk a long way, frequently beyond the 30 minutes or 1,000 meters, and they have to carry it. They have to spare it, save it, and crucially worry about it. And this worrying about water is a critical factor why where you've got tourism, it's definitely not necessarily empowering for all the women. So it's very important for us to understand that rights are all interconnected, right? So I could have been doing this presentation not about water rights. I could have been doing it about labour rights. I could have been doing it about housing rights. But if we use the lens of water rights, just to understand how they're all interconnected, right? So the rights to water affects the right to education. And this is particularly true of girls' education, because it's usually girls who have to help their mothers with walking to collect water, and therefore missing out on their education. Yes, maybe they do get to go to school, but they certainly don't get to have time to do homework as well, or they're still in the queue and school started, so they're late for school. Water rights also affect our ability to feed our families, because with not enough water, we can't cook or grow healthy food. It uses far less water to cook some noodles than it does to cook rice and beans, all right? And therefore, very many mothers are not able to cook healthy food for their children due to the lack of water, and they can't grow stuff around their houses, medicinal plants or easy grow vegetables, chilies and tomatoes, because they don't have sufficient water to water those plants. Increased water insecurity also increases rates of gender-based violence, the right to be free from violence. And I'm doing a study at the moment on the island of Sumba in Indonesia and also in Peru, to produce the data to show this link. because we know it's true, but we just need more data to convince policyholders. And when it comes to in tourism work, what many women and girls are saying to me is they put up with sexual violence in the workplace, uncomfortable feelings that their bosses push them into, and they put up with it and they shut up and they don't talk about it and they don't raise their voices about it for fear of losing their job or for fear that they won't be promoted or kept on. So there's sexual violence going on in the home in the form of partner violence because of increased water insecurity, and there's also sexual violence going on in the tourism workplaces. So having seen the water, the empowerment, maybe I can just put some of this together. So tourism can empower some people, and it does provide a very important lifeline for very poor women. There's plenty of evidence to show that. But we must remember that tourism also places additional burdens on women. And when tourism is not considered as part of a wider system, not just about jobs and economy, it's got to be seen within the environment, along with environmental considerations, okay? Empowerment is not just about giving women jobs. If it was just about giving women jobs, right? Giving women jobs means there's more people, humans in the job market, which depresses prices of labour, all right, and makes tourism cheaper. It doesn't necessarily empower those women, all right. It very frequently overburdens and adds additional burdens to those women. They get forced into exploitative labour because of the other considerations which are going on. Tourism isn't considered part of that wider system. Then came COVID, and I don't think we can take away the impact that the pandemic has had on hopefully being the spark that can transform tourism. So if we go back to Labuan Bajo, where a lot of this is one place where I've done this research, or Bali, or Costa Rica, or Corella, it wouldn't matter. The story would be very similar. The story is that because COVID came, there's no more tourism work. So that motorcycle that I had on credit to get to work, I can't pay the credit. I didn't plant crops because I had cash work from my tourism job. So now where do I get something to eat? I'm ashamed to ask for help from my friends and family, because when I had my tourism job, I was so busy that I didn't keep up those reciprocal relations that existed in my society prior to tourism. I'm putting up with abuse from my landlord now, in addition to the other abuses that I was dealing with, because I can't pay my rent. There's an increase in gender-based violence that's been across the board, not just in tourism destinations, but 10 more women, additional women a week in Labuan Bajo at the moment, right? That's a town with that had 50,000 people before the pandemic, and a lot of them have gone home. Critically, water still doesn't flow down my pipe. You would think that that water that was diverted to the tourism industry would now be flowing down the pipes, but no. They're using the opportunity of no tourists to improve the infrastructure. And at the same time, I've got no money to buy water from the water truck. And the cost of water from the water truck, when before we were competing with tourism, you would think maybe the price had gone down, but no, the price hasn't gone down, because water sellers still need to keep their revenue streams. So how much empowerment is going on for those women who are left in a tourism destination when tourism dries up? So tourism can be empowering, but only when it's part of a total system. And there's an end to the development of what my respondents call citizens It's like citizens don't exist. The system is directed towards tourism, not towards the citizens in the destination. And that has got to stop if tourism is going to be empowering. Tourism can only be empowering when tourism is part of a diversified livelihood strategy, because this pandemic will be followed by other pandemics. And when it's not followed by pandemics, it's going to be followed by tsunamis or volcanic explosions or terrorism or any other thing that we know stops tourism. All right. We can't have economies which are totally tourism focused, because when there is a downturn, it does the opposite to empowering. Tourism, therefore, can only be empowering when it's made a central pillar, when gender equality is made a central pillar of sustainability. We need to put gender equality at the centre of our build forward better. And no, that's not a typo error. Keep asking me this. I don't want to build back. I don't want tourism to go back to the way it was. I want to look to the future, to something that's better than what we had. I want a forward-looking type of tourism. And that's how we're going to recover from the pandemic for a more resilient future. So just to think about how can we make these changes happen? Well, there's a great need to strengthen women's capacities in all areas of life so that they do have that voice and they do have that agency and they are looked up to. We can start doing this by removing overtly discriminatory laws which exist in many societies. We can do it by including them in policy making, and I suggest one of the great places to start is with women's rights organisations, because they understand the voices that women that aren't being heard. I think it's absolutely critical that researchers get gender disaggregated data. If you don't have the data on it, if you don't monitor it, you can't manage it. We need the data to be disaggregated in order to be able to show to the policymakers, look, this is what is going on. Gender equality needs to be part of sustainability indicators. We've got all these indicators, but where was the gender equality? Who wrote those indicators? I guess it was men, because they just forgot about gender equality when they wrote them. We need very clear codes of practice and very clear reporting procedures. These need to be socialized throughout organizations so that women can report abuse without fear of losing their jobs, without fear of reprisals. Okay, perpetuators are held to account, and these very clear codes of conduct and reporting procedures need to be socialized throughout the organizations. I think it's very important to remember that empowered women empower others. So when you can showcase women in managerial positions, showcase those that can run their own businesses, women who have successful careers, it's a great way to inspire girls in tourism destinations and to motivate them to understand that they can do better within their societies and their voice can be heard. I think it's really important that businesses start playing their part. It's not just about activism and organisations like mine, Equality in Tourism, that businesses have got to take their share of the burden of ensuring gender equality is put central to the COVID recovery. And if you do give women's voice post-COVID-19, what it will mean is that tourism is responsive to everybody's needs. And if it's responsive to everybody's needs, we're going to be more resilient to the future shocks that we are most certainly going to face. I'd just like to end by saying, if you want to know more about this kind of stuff, do check out www.equalityintourism.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cole. Okay, so thank you very much again, Dr. Cole, for that very informative and comprehensive presentation. I think every one of us are moved, actually. I mean, for example, just to highlight some of the points Dr. Cole made, she actually gave emphasis to the interlink between tourism, gender empowerment, and water, which oftentimes we take for granted. For one, I would take for granted the water that's available right in my house, right? But again, what Dr. Cole's presentation actually pointed out or suggests for us is actually to rethink the way we think, right? To rethink our mental models, rethink how we look at managing and developing tourism. Because in acknowledging, for example, water rights and other interlinked rights, we can find ourselves rethinking how tourism can actually be empowering. And it's not just about giving women jobs, but it's also about considering tourism as part of a wider system, as she put it. And again, I really appreciate that Dr. Cole gave us an idea on what tourism could actually look like in the post-pandemic, that it's not about bringing back what was before, but actually building forward better, as she puts it. And again, challenging us to put gender at the center of tourism development and sustainable tourism. So thank you for that, Dr. Cole. And again, for our dear audience we're at 130 participants already. So thank you again. You may feel free to start writing down your questions for our speakers, and we'll address them later on during the Q&A session. So without further ado, let's continue with our discussion. Our second speaker is Dr. Marco Valeri. Dr. Marco is a professor of tourism and head of Tourism Institute at the Faculty of Economics, Niccolò Cusano University in Rome. He is also a member of AIEST and member of Supervisory Board of Italian Association Tour Operators and Travel Agents. Dr. Valeri is also a visiting professor at Faculty of Social Sciences and Leisure Management, School of Hospitality, Tourism and Events at Taylor's University, Malaysia. He has been involved in many research projects and has published in many papers, books and book chapters on tourism economics, development, competitiveness, and policy and environmental management. His primary research interests include topics on entrepreneurship, knowledge management, and business innovation, creating conditions and development of SMEs, and governance and management of tourism enterprises. Following his recently published book on gender and tourism, challenges and entrepreneurial opportunities, Dr. Marco will talk about gender and entrepreneurship today. So Dr. Marco, you may start sharing with us your experiences and thoughts.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this important invite. I'm honored to be here with you, with Professor Jafari, very important colleague in tourism management, and I'm honored to be here with you in this important webinar, academic webinar, talking about women in tourism, exploring challenges and emerging opportunities. The topic is very interesting, but also very difficult to explain all in one lesson, in one webinar. These topics little discussed in academic management, in tourism management literature. Macroeconomic analysis are preferred in this moment. This is demonstrated by the consideration that international journals that publish paper on this topic are very few, and then prefer economic and managerial topic. For this consideration, last year I decided to take up the challenge. I prepared a call for book chapter, risking not to be successful. And I was wrong. The book's team was very successful. The book is published and its title is Gender and Tourism, Challenges and Entrepreneurial Opportunities, Emerald Publishing. The book collect chapter of colleagues from different nations, Russia, Jordan, Lebanon, Greece, Italy, and other important international nations. The books focused on trying to understand whether women with a real resource for the potential competitive advantages, direction, organization, and internal and external relationship of the company. Female entrepreneurial experiences is characterized by a network approach where great importance is attributed to the relation dimension. It also emphasizes the tendency of entrepreneurs to integrate the professional working dimension into private and family-based. And from this point of view, there are profound differences in the attitudes of entrepreneurs, more oriented to the separation between the various spheres of their own life. In women entrepreneurship studies, the analysis focused on the network women entrepreneurs create, their composition, the identity and characteristics of the subjects involved, the role of the latter relation to the management of the company, and the ability to influence their performance. There are differences in morphology and size, noting that the women activated women networks is formed by greater female component that male and tend to be small. Few subjects and with the prevalent percent of women. It's difficult to see a standardized network model. Few are the studies on this, and few different the topic being considered. It's agreed that the woman-led enterprise is characterized by the frequent use during all phases of the business life cycle of connection and networks of a cooperative nature rather than being propagated to atomistic management, which is seen as a characteristic of male firms predisposed to a distinct separation between family, social, and work sphere. This difference finds its foundation in the different way of being and living the personal and professional sphere of men and women. The idea of network for women is the creation of necessary link between work, family, and community, which often coincide with the main motivation on doing business. The women managers tend to form an enterprise network composed of few subjects and preferably of female gender. The use of network is recurring during all phases of company life, especially during startup, and becomes the main tool for achieving the aim of reconciliation between work and family. The book is the result of a reflection involving authors of different nationalities. This book aims to provide a comprehensive collection of chapters, including new insight for traditional approaches and methods, as well as more recent development in research methodology in the context of gender and tourism. In this book, we need interdisciplinary pathway research and complementary surveys on the entire female universe, enhancing the study of gender, management, and organization. This is why it's appropriate for studying gender issues to consider this and to look to define it in research topics, and at the same time analyze its evolutionary dynamics. Studies on women have been conducted in many scientific areas: sociology, psychology, management, economics, organization, and also from an interdisciplinary approach. Perspectives. These books adopt a multidisciplinary approach from management to local development, from entrepreneurship to sociology, from innovation to sustainability, providing examples about gender and tourism. Consider the variety of the topic dealt with. I decided to structure the books in two parts. The first part collects chapters that analyze the potential and obstacle facing women in reaching entrepreneurial and top management positions in the tourism industry. This chapter analyzed the key factors of female entrepreneurship in the tourism sector, the participation of a woman at leading decision-making position worldwide, the potential of female business development in both global and local terms, for the underrepresentation in top managerial key positions. Paper following this specific part of the book have as follow: Gender equality and women entrepreneurial leadership in tourism, cruises tourism, gender and sustainability, senior customer satisfaction in hospitality, drivers and challenges by gender, gender-based violence and gender impacts in tourism, understanding the experiences of rural women in tourism enterprises, female travels, the underlying motivation, gender perceived tourism impacts and tourism development support. The second part includes chapters that analyze different case studies, which the most appropriate governance and management model to be implemented in the context of gender and tourism. For example, women leadership in the Jordanian hospitality sector, future opportunities, the gender dimension in secondary vocational tourism education, corporate climate and glass ceiling in the hospitality industry, the woman's point of view, the development of medical tourism in Greece, the provision of specialized services for women, female entrepreneurship to development of agritourism in Greece, female entrepreneurship and tourism, international tourism, and female entrepreneurship in tourism sector, the case of Greece. I would like to hope that our ambition to publish a book on gender in tourism to add value to such a complex and issues, and one of gender in tourism, but shedding some light on its interdisciplinary nature and as well as tool and approaches to cope with it, was fraught with success. Long live women, and especially the strength of women. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marco, for your insightful discussion. I guess Dr. Marco actually shared with us a summary or overview of how the academic perspective on gender and entrepreneurship actually looks like at the moment. So as pointed out by Dr. Marco, there are profound differences in the perspectives of men and women entrepreneurs. And highlighting, of course, here is the importance of network building for women entrepreneurs and where women are actually seen at the center of these networks. So again, emphasis was also given on the role of women entrepreneurs in balancing the multifaceted aspects of family, social, and work spheres. So by acknowledging that tourism is actually a multifaceted industry, this is where we can start recognizing how women can actually play a role in creating this entrepreneurial network. So thank you for that, Dr. Marco. And I guess to complement our discussion so far with Dr. Stroma and Dr. Marco, our third speaker here, Ms. Anne Dumalyang, who has done an exemplary work in conservation with some communities in the Philippines, will be our third speaker. So Ms. Dumalyang is the co-founder and project officer at Masungi Georeserve, an award-winning conservation area led and funded by Blue Star Construction and Development Corporation. As a geotourism and sustainable conservation expert, Ms. Dumalyang has been active in ensuring that local communities are integrated in the development of the ecotourism site in Masungi. And through her work, she has earned the titles of National Geographic Young Explorer and a World Economic Forum Global Shaper. So today, Ms. Anne will share with us her personal experience on the topics of gender, environment, and communities. And with that, we're excited to hear about your thoughts and experience, Anne. So you may start sharing your screen.
Thank you, Ila, for that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for having us here. Before I go into the meat substance of what I'd like to share about women in tourism, I'd of course also like to give you a brief overview of what we do in Masungi. For those of you who do not know just yet, our organization actually has a very intergenerational approach to conservation. My dad started the initiative all the way back in 1996 when I was just about 6 years old. And the area looked like this at that time. It was severely deforested, and land was actually distributed left and right to people who did not deserve it. But after 2 decades of working the land, we managed to turn it into something like this, really showing us that restoration and reforestation is something that we can achieve and make a big progress on during our lifetimes, and that, there's hope for our forests. In the Philippines, we only have about 3% of our primary forest cover left. And though studies would show that 23% of the country remain to be forested, this actually includes plantations, and areas that do not exactly constitute a forest by international definitions. Sometime in 2013, I graduated from university, and in 2014, the latter part of it, I joined my dad in launching and bringing out Masungi Georeserve. So this is something actually that I've largely done with the help of my sister. And the reason why we had to do this was because we needed more people to understand why the place was worth giving a fighting chance at surviving. If it were just 20 of us, young, tiny people working to find our way to get this place conserved, we probably won't reach anything. We definitely needed more people to understand why it's worth conserving. And we also, of course, wanted to make sure that the financing for the conservation work do remain sustainable, so that even past our lifetimes, the place would still remain standing. And this was why we launched Masungi Georeserve, including the first trail experience that we had. We call it the Discovery Trail. So since then, the area has not just been a sanctuary for wildlife, it's also a place that people can go out to see, to learn more about the environment and reconnect with nature. And the story, of course, does not end there. In 2017, we took on the larger task, a very ambitious goal, to restore 3,000 hectares of land surrounding the initial area that we were working on, all funded and supported solely by the funds that we have raised and saved from the earlier tourism activities that we've done. So we're proud to say that we have made a good amount of progress when it comes to this. Despite the pandemic being around for more than a year and a half now, we're happy to say that we're still standing. We have not had tourism for quite a while now, at least a consistent number of visitors, but we managed to save up enough so that despite the environmental opportunism that's been happening in the last year and a half, we can still double down on protecting our forests. And that in mind, we were able to establish about 13 ranger stations through vulnerable land. We were able to put together 15 kilometers worth of monitoring trails and even apprehend six large-scale land grabbers last year that were threatening the Upper Marikina watershed protected landscape, which actually impacts about 20 million Filipinos downstream in Metro Manila. So lots of talk about how this entire area is supposed to be forested, when on the ground, with our experience and with our guest experience, it's pretty clear that it's only about 10-20% forested. So there's a lot of noise generated because of the fact that more people were experiencing this area and bearing witness to the injustice and the environmental offenses happening inside by a local small team that's largely women-led as well. Our officer level is 60% composed of women. My sister and I, along with my dad, are at the leadership. And altogether, the organization is composed of about 49% women. But before I go into how women have contributed to conservation and tourism, I'd also like to do this at the backdrop of two realities. One is the fact that our large support base is composed of millennials. So this is where you see the power of young people in action and millennials really fighting for, a product and a project and an experience that they believe in. So it is not does not escape all of us. And we have experienced that also in Masungi. I can safely say that about 70% of our visitors are probably millennials. And if you are to characterize millennials, we need to understand at least three things. These are things that we have experienced in Masungi ourselves. One is that there is an emphasis on and a willingness to spend on unique transformative experiences more than ownership. Masungi, when we launched it, trails cost about $4 to go on. We priced ours at $30 US. And millennials, given the high quality experience found inside, still found it worthwhile going on. Two is that millennials also have inherent distrust of traditional advertising. I think Ayla and some people here might be able to relate. What we believe in are user-generated content, what our peers pass on to us as their opinions, what stories they post on Facebook and Instagram that serve as social proof that they trust those brands. And last would be that millennials are very conscious of culture, purpose, and impact when it comes to making purchase decisions and brand loyalty. A lot of our visitors are also return guests. And despite the fact that we haven't opened doors in the year and a half that has passed, our support base online of about 30,000 Instagram users, 200,000 followers on Facebook, and 300 expertise-based volunteers has still kept us alive. And a lot of that, truth be told, are composed of millennials. Now, the second reality, I don't have a slide for it, would be that the pandemic really gives a unique opportunity for genuine ecotourism to shine through, because all of the activities are being moved outdoors. There's now a better understanding of why carrying capacity might be worth considering in the destinations that we move in. And there's a lot of emphasis too on safety and hygiene, things that high value experiences in the outdoors also prioritize. So in Masungi, how have women contributed to the work that we do? The experiences that we've launched have a huge contribution from women and communities. So the move towards a low volume high customization, high value approach in Masungi is largely geared by communities. I have known through experience that women are actually informal guardians of traditional knowledge and the communities that they belong to. They might not have formal power, but they are definitely the ones people trust because they're the ones taking care of elders. They're the ones taking care of the young ones. And all of that put together constitute a huge part of the community, truth be told. If we're talking about upland destinations with able men actually going all the way down to Metro Manila for jobs such as constructions, that is a huge part of the local population at the end of the day. Women, the young people, and the elders who trust them. Women are also very much equipped for the development of unique services and products, which require time, skills, and resource management that have already practiced in their own households. So when you're talking about engaging in the informal economy, you can expect women to be present at home, number one, but also number two, to have certain sets of skills that are necessary when it comes to conducting or establishing micro enterprises, and even just testing and creating products, which may seem daunting for some. Because while we're talking about improvements when it comes to recipes, experiences, right? Caring for people, which are actually things that traditionally women do day in and day out. And last but not the least is that women also have important characteristics actually rooting from traditional female roles. So you can expect thoughtfulness and nurturing attitude, a customized approach, which millennials value, and gender sensitivity to come very naturally. I don't have the slide here, but I was just reading a while ago that when it comes to young people, a study actually showed that about 8% of young females would identify as feminist, and 25% of male actually identify as feminist. So when it comes to capturing the millennial audience, it makes sense to involve women. It makes sense to make sure that they are empowered because young people put an emphasis on this. So in this photo here on the side is Kagawad Rose. She was my first friend in the community. Before Masungi was launched, we were exploring different parts of the area, learning more about the culture and the unique, biodiversity that we have in our area. She was the one who introduced me to Tatay Super and his family, who then taught me about traditional medicine and all of these very unique plants that we now use to make the products that we have in Masungi even more unique. So with traditional soaring agents used at home in Metro Manila is only known to be Sampaloc. Up here in Masungi, we have Batuan, we have Katmon, we have many, many others. Thanks to the knowledge of our communities and the women who safeguarded this knowledge. Added to that, Kagawad Rose also actually introduced me to the first crop of park rangers I have, which were naturally composed mostly of women. And these girls are amazing. They started off with almost no educational background, but it is so natural for them to care for the guests that even at the end of the guest experience, there's a lot of feedback about how thoughtful the visitors are. So we just tell them to unleash your inner mama, unleash your inner mama, and it actually really leads to very wonderful, thoughtful, customized experiences. What else? My experience also showed that women have a vital role in creating genuine impact in the communities that we work in. Women are very much gifted when it comes to creating relationships. And because of our history of being sidelined and somewhat not given a voice, we also have huge resilience for navigating through complex social and political structures just to get what we want done. So that comes more naturally for us too. And at the same time, it also became very apparent that attention and politics of life of children, and the family influences a lot of the decisions that women make. And so if we want to change how resources are spent today, it's critical to put women in leadership in areas where they can make decisions, so that we can influence the power dynamics that ultimately lead to how these resources are distributed. And I have a very good recent example of that. I have many examples because this happens so often. So at the picture here that you'll see, it's one of the bigger challenges we encountered through the year. Not was a time when we had armed guards fence off a portion of the conservation site, declaring it as a private property of their owner, illegally, of course. And later on, they said that they were doing this for, when they were caught, they said that they were doing this for the chieftains of a nearby tribe. We were surprised, we didn't know people, but thankfully, I've managed to find a way to reach out to the women in the community. And we found out that the decisions were being made, which involved basically distributing ancestral land to people who should not be holding it, was not something that was sanctioned by elders and the community. And it was that one woman who understood what was going on and really was courageous enough to stand up, that we were able to find out that something like this was happening and inform all 100 elders in the community that they were being shortchanged like this. So that's just one woman. And in the months that follow, no more than a year after, we're seeing her take a bigger role when it comes to decision making. We're seeing other Indigenous women step up to propose to contribute to their own leadership. We're also seeing them change their power structures because they've seen that the chieftains weren't serving the purpose of the community any longer. So it's just a really wonderful story of how women have stepped up to inform the community and really, direct decision-making and resource allocation to ends that actually benefit the community and not just a small group of people. Last but not the least, if you are a business owner or a tourism operator that's here, I think Ayla has also argued this a while ago. Tourism is actually a very unique space in empowering women. So if you would like to have a purpose, a mission, and advocacy in the work that you do, this is one easy way of adding that element to your business. Why is this so? Because the kind of industry that we have is just very multifaceted. It includes so many practices from marketing to engineering to property management and such. And for a woman being able to enter this industry, even maybe just from a communications or a guest-facing starting point, actually allows them to get exposed to so many other skills and practices, learn if it could work for them, and show the people around them that they could have a role to play in those roles that are traditionally male-dominated. And I think that's very powerful to have a space to demonstrate that you can do it, more saying you can do it. And second is that the multiplier effect that tourism has, of course, leads to micro enterprises and unique opportunities in remote locations that our women can benefit from. So some stories to share in this photo is Angge and Cherry. They were our trail managers. So they're the ones walking through the mountains day in and day out, leading teams of park rangers, not just in maintenance, but also in enforcement. And they come from a botany background, from a research background, research laboratory background. But through the role that they were able to take, they were also able to show others that they could take non-traditionally male-led roles. They're also able to empower the rangers under them who are women see that it can be done. And when it comes to micro enterprises, I guess one thing that I'd like to highlight is Nanay Lourdes. I don't have her photo here, but there is a traditional form of like packaging a meal in our nearby communities that not a lot of people can do anymore. Fortunately, she can still do it. I don't know how she does it. It's pretty difficult. But she is now one of our suppliers for preparing food for visitors. And it just adds a very unique spin when the soaring agents they use are not available in the supermarket anymore, and the way it's packaged is also wonderfully done and culturally relevant. Of course, there are also challenges. Reflecting on my experience, I also understood voices and decision making are so important. Happy that there are lots of discussions when it comes to gender equality and women in tourism, and also a lot of professors really putting in the attention on it, because through that education, then we can expect more people, more women rather, to be competent and able to reach those positions. Of course, the availability of financial resources is also a challenge for some communities. And there's also, of course, a need for training and benefits specialized for working women and the families that they are still primarily protecting. So say, for instance, in Masungi, we have well-being trainings. Some of these include household management, emergency response, not just for the team, but also for the family, so they don't have to worry about them. Sex education, because that allows women to take charge of their bodies, financial management, etc. When it comes to benefits, these are really very simple things. If you have women working in the organization, you can expect that they're also the same ones who are responsible for caring for their children once their children are sick. So say, for instance, in Masungi, vacation leaves can also be used as sick leaves if they have to care for members of the family. So they're just very simple things that you can do to make the workplace a healthier one for women in our communities. This photo is a little bit disturbing. I'm not sure if you understand what it is, but this is a challenge that our group and team faced in the last month. These are bullet holes. Someone fired at our ranger station. They only narrowly escaped. One of them was hit here on the neck. The other one was hit here on the top. Had that bullet moved half an inch, the outcomes would be very, very different. And my point is that outside the entire story, this was done by men who were inclined towards a very macho culture, to the point that, and I feel it, they thought that they could do something like this because we're a women-led organization, and they expect us to be very kind and nice. So it's so important to have, this photo still gets me, so I think I'm still getting teary-eyed, but it's still very important to have government policy, government support, working good governance to make sure that women can flourish, because there are cultural elements that still hold us back and still think of us as, individuals that could just be thrown around when it comes to situations like this. Yes, I guess that's why I placed that slide in. Sorry, it's still very difficult to talk about. But that's it. I am very eager for our discussions later.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that. I guess I would speak on behalf of our audience. It's such a passionate and moving presentation. I mean, just a side note, I guess, Anne has been very busy actually with a lot of conservation work, and she did mention the issues that they're currently facing with when it comes to their park rangers. So I'm really happy that she actually made time to share with us this experience, because again, it's a meaning. I mean, everyone I think here is really moved, and your passion, Anne, actually transcends even the virtual setup, even if we're people from Japan, from US, the Philippines, and other countries, they could feel, I mean, the passion that you have for your work. So again, thank you for that. And I guess just to sum up the very passionate and real story that Anne has shared with us. Again, she pointed out, I guess, the power of millennials, generation in spurring conservation, sustainable tourism, and also in promoting gender equality. And again, emphasized in the role of women in tourism and conservation as seen in the Masungi's actual experience, where 49% of their organization is comprised of women, is that women are actually seen as informal guardians of local knowledge, where women are equipped with development of products by applying their own personal experience, and where women can actually, as pointed out by her experience in working with the park rangers, that women has the ability to navigate through existing complex social and power relations. But then again, it's also important that Anne also emphasized the challenges still that remain in making sure that women, that this tourism, this unique space of tourism, is actually an empowering space for women. So again, not just as a moderator, but as an avid fan and supporter of Masungi, I think Anne knows that. I hope we can actually visit Masungi again once the situation gets better. So again, thank you very much, Anne, for your time and your presentation. So I guess finally capping off our roster of panelists, we have Dr. Randi Alampai. Dr. Alampai is an associate professor and chair of the Gender and Development Committee at the University of the Philippines Asian Institute of Tourism. He previously served as one of the director and senior consultant at Asia Pacific Projects Incorporated, an international firm that specializes in management consulting on tourism-related projects, including tourism policy, planning, and development. His specialization includes local and regional economic development, competitiveness for local government units, sustainable tourism development, tourism research and statistics, tourism market research and analysis, tourism human resource development, and institutional capacity building. With his stellar work in Philippine tourism, Dr. Alampai today will talk about gender and tourism in the field. So again, Dr. Randi, let's cap off this discussion and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ayla. Thank you very much, SCoT webinar, for the opportunity to be part of this panel. I guess I'm the outlier in this panel because I'm not an expert in women in tourism. I'm not an expert in gender and tourism. Okay, I was a program manager for a Canadian government-funded development program for local economic development for 6 years, and then I returned to the academe in 2017. And then when you go into the faculty, you're asked to join certain committees. So I was a part of the Gender and Development Committee. And then when the chair of that committee suddenly had to ask to be relieved of his responsibilities because he had other more pressing responsibilities in the university, I was appointed chair of our Gender and Development Committee, or our GAD committee, essentially because nobody else wanted it. And so, and that's how I was, I fell accidentally into gender as a new focus of my personal research, of my study, because I wanted to immerse myself. I wanted to at least familiarize myself or improve my stock knowledge of gender in tourism, and particularly women in tourism, to be more effective in my position as a chair of the Gender and Development and Committee. So this is the few things that I can share. So what I did was these are basically reflections on the 6 years that I worked in the local governance support program for local economic development. That was a joint program of the Canadian and Philippine governments. And from 2008 to 2016, the program provided technical assistance to 18 local projects or local economic development projects, each project lasting about 2 to 3 years each, and where the goals of those projects were to improve conditions in the client communities through increased investments and new jobs generated. So we worked with clusters of local government units, clusters of cities and municipalities across the Philippines, or sometimes we worked with provincial governments. And each one would propose a local economic development project. Okay? 16 out of the 18 local economic development projects we worked with during that period had tourism as the primary local economic focus. And I think that's also why I was recruited to be the program manager for this project. They needed somebody with a tourism background. So all of our sites were clusters or cities, clusters of cities or municipalities in central and southern Philippines. So central Philippines is particularly known as the resort area of the Philippines. That's where we have all the islands and beach destinations. A total of 89 cities and municipalities in 17 provinces, and for each cluster, about 6 cities or municipalities. Okay, and then 7 project sites had airports at the time of the project, and all of the sites were identified as tourism development areas in the National Tourism Development Plan of the Department of Tourism. Okay, but then when I came in as a project manager, part of my marching orders were also to strengthen how we mainstreamed the cross-cutting themes of the project. Okay, these were themes that the Canadian government and the Philippine government insisted should be mainstreamed in our project. So this was coming with the Millennium Development Goals. So the 3 cross-cutting themes were poverty reduction, environmental conservation, and gender equity. Okay, so our donors, our bosses, wanted to see more impact with regard to gender equity. Okay, more impact from our project reports, from our projects, beyond the usual disaggregation of data by sex. Okay, the feeling was, or the interpretation was that although we were very conscious about that mandate or practice of reporting our accomplishments and disaggregating the data by sex, the data tended to be submitted or collected more for compliance with the gender equity monitor. There was little analysis of the data. Even if we had the data, there's little analysis because we were so focused on the activities and accomplishing our outputs. Okay, so we were also instructed that they needed more stories. Like if you work in development projects, particularly foreign funded projects, okay, the funding agencies or the international governments want stories, not just numbers. Okay, so they wanted us to see concrete stories about, let's say, new jobs for women being generated, or stories about improvements in the quality of life of users. So they wanted to see more tangible examples or illustrations of how we mainstream gender equity in our projects. So that was the challenge given to my team. Okay, and at that time, the Department of Tourism was also highlighting or emphasizing gender. So they came up with these toolkits. The one on the right is specifically produced by the Department of Tourism, Gender Toolkit for Tourism, and then the other one on the left was published by the Department of Tourism together with the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. These were toolkits that, as the title says, gender-responsive toolkits for planning tourism, for managing tourism. But what we found was that hardly anybody was using them. Like, people were still going, our clients were still developing projects, and then the use of the gender toolkits or the mainstreaming of gender into the planning tended to be very superficial at most. Okay. So we started with this. So the challenge was as well, okay, how do you mainstream women into your project? So we started with this question. So where are the women in tourism. If these are all our project sites, where are the women in our projects? And then from there, let's see what we can do. Okay, so this is just an example of one of our project sites. This is in northern Iloilo. It's composed of, our project site was composed of 5 municipalities in the northern part of Iloilo province. And basically our approach to answering the question of where the women are was to map the tourism value chain across the tourism sites in our project area. Okay, so here are the access points, the regional gateways into our province. There are two domestic airports from which you can reach northern Iloilo. One is from Rojas in province of Capiz, and then of course Iloilo, which is about Iloilo Airport, which is about 6 hours away, farther away. Okay, so and at that time, the German Development Agency, or GIZ, was doing a lot of work on value chain analysis in industries, and particularly in tourism also. So we used that tool. We also got inspiration from the work that the Dutch agencies were doing in South Asia and Southeast Asia, SNV, which was doing a lot of work in terms of strengthening or working with the tourism industries in the destination. So basically, our question was, okay, where are the tourism industries happening, or where are the tourism activities likely to happen? So these are the sites. The black circles are the ones that are the sites that we identified as potential attraction or activity sites. And then our analysis was around those areas. We asked our clients to get information. How are women participating in or benefiting from the tourism-related developments in these sites, or the potential tourism developments in these sites? What are the constraints or barriers that limit the opportunities for women in and around these sites? And then how are they being affected by tourism activities in these sites? So these questions would be part now of the plan, part now of the tourism circuit plan, that would be the basis for our funding for the projects to be funded. Okay, so basically that's a very rapid explanation of the planning that went into our projects. But these are just some examples of the results of that. So of course, we identified these gender gaps and inequalities in these sites. We also found when we did the value chain analysis, we would get more information. We would have more data available in the formal sector, in the formal tourism industry. And most of these would be in the town centers or the service centers. But we are also working with rural destinations or remote destinations where tourism has not yet been established, or tourism is still very, very informal. And that's one of the big information gaps that we had to work with. Okay? So we went through this exercise, and our clients were able to come up with projects such as this. Okay, so they proposed training programs on basic innkeeping, where basically training the women to be ready to offer their places as homestay, or even to set up their separate inns. Okay, here's an example. We worked with women's groups, and here's just one of those examples where we tried our partners from the province of Iloilo gave them training on making souvenirs out of shells that they found in the beaches, in the coastal areas, and the woman here at the bottom continues to do her job of taking care of children. So all of these trainings, all of these activities were recognized what their roles in the communities were also. So the livelihood projects were intended to complement or supplement whatever it is that they were hoping for. At the same time, creating opportunities for them to part of that value chain of tourism from the peripheral areas to the service centers. And here's the last one. This is the one project that I also wanted to identify. There are dive spots. They wanted to start offering their destination, their community as a diving area. So, but there were no dive guides. There were no one. So we needed to train them to scuba dive. So these are the participants of training to get CMAS certification as a dive guide. Actually, 2 women. There were 9 who participated. 2 were women. One completed everything and earned a CMAS certification as a dive guide. The other, I think, missed a couple of 1 or 2 modules. So she was not able to get the dive certification at the time, but she qualified to be a snorkeling guide. Okay, so when I returned to the academe, and then I was thrust into this mission of looking at gender and development in tourism. Okay, so one of the things that I reflected on is that there's really more data being collected in the formal sector. Like when I tried to look for data for this presentation, we have a lot of data at the macro level, and it's being collected from hotels, resorts, etc. But if we're looking at from the perspective of empowerment, economic empowerment, and particularly poverty reduction, we don't have as much information from the informal sector and from the peripheral sites, the sites that are just beginning to introduce tourism. The other thing is that there's a lot of good work being done for women, for empowerment by development agencies or even government agencies, but these are not being reported or studied enough, or maybe we in the academe are so isolated that we don't know what's happening. So maybe there needs to be more communication between the development agencies and the academe, or maybe more appreciation in the academe for gray literature from the reports that the development agencies or development projects are producing. The other thing is that when you talk about women empowerment, it doesn't happen overnight. So we really need to have more research about outcomes. That was one of the frustrations in our projects. The most that we could report about were the outputs from our activities and maybe some preliminary indications that there are improvements in the situation. But it would take several years before we can really say how much change has happened, how much change has happened for the situation of women in our sites. And then lastly, again, in trying to look for research here in the Philippines, we need more multidisciplinary or collaborative projects and approaches to better understand women and tourism in the Philippines. There are a lot of scholars looking at the situation of women. Right? There are a lot of scholars in women's studies. Okay? But most of the research that I've seen hardly touches or relates to tourism. If ever they relate to tourism, they look at the perspective of violence against women or abuse of women in the tourism sector. In our tourism programs, most of our research has been on, most of the research that I see relates to the formal industry, management, participation of women, the percentage of women in management positions, which is important. Okay, but there are many other things that we're not able to focus on. I don't know if it's because of the way that we value certain topics as publishable or not. But I think at this point, if we really want to have a deeper understanding of tourism in the Philippines, maybe we in the tourism programs should start evangelizing with our social science partners, with our arts and humanities colleagues, to engage in these kinds of research so that we have a really full understanding of the challenges and the potential solutions for women in tourism in the Philippines. So again, thank you very much to SCoT webinar for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to a very enlightening discussion. Thank you very much. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Dr. Randi, for sharing with us your extensive experience and reflection in working in tourism. I guess as the person who closes this discussion, really, Dr. Randi actually painted an image that answers a very essential question that most of us really forget. Where are women in tourism, at least in the Philippines? It's important for us to know where they are, for us to also know how we can assist them in moving forward, I guess. And as pointed out by Dr. Randi's experience, women are engaged in various ways. He pointed out in souvenir making and scuba diving, among others, right? But again, it's important that Dr. Randi also pointed out that for us to look at the nuances of gender and women empowerment, it's important also to address some gaps, not just in terms of academic and literary gaps, but also gaps that also affect the implementation of certain policies that actually can change the way gender is framed in different localities, destinations, and countries. So again, thank you, Dr. Randi, for sharing your experience with us. And of course, I know you're all seeing that our chat box is actually very active and very busy with comments and questions. And I know everyone's itching to have the discussion already, but in the meantime, I'd like to pass on the floor to Professor Kazem for the program proceedings. I believe we are ready for a cultural break. Professor Kazem?
Thank you, Ella. Thanks to all the speakers. I could learn a lot. I saw a big symphony and very related topics, and the important topic that is the role of women. As it is the SCoT custom, we are going to give you a 2 minutes break. Please move your bodies, grab your drink. We are coming back to have the fruit of this discussion, which is the question and answer. We will have our SCoT mentor comments and wrap up by Professor Jafari as well. So please don't forget to move and watch this video that is recommended by our moderator. So please let me know if the video is working.
Ang aming pagbabalsa, malaking tulong sa akin. Una-una, 20 pesos lang, 15 pesos, hanggang sa umipod na 1 kilong bigas na natutuwa kami sa amin noon samahan. Ako po si Marilyn Monserrat mula Pandinlik, San Pablo, Laguna. Umpisa po kami mga 7 o 8 kaming mga kababaihan na nagbabalsa. Bago po yung balsang ito, ang ginagawa po naman namin yung nagtitinda po kami ng isda. Tapos ako naman po, number 1 po trabaho ko labada. Ang balsa po namin year 2007, nakagawa na po kami ng isang balsa. Tapos sunod-sunod na po yung gawa namin, inumpisahan namin na may ano na kami, may bisita nga 2, 3 hanggang sa 5, dumami na po. Dahil sa trabaho namin dito, natutustusan ang pangangailangan po ng aming pamilya. Pinapaaral ko ang anak ko. Tsaka kahit nakaunti, naabot ko ang aking pangarap. Masaya po ako ngayon, lalo na po pag ng aking anak na bunso makapagtapos ng pag-aral. Ako'y natutuwa na po na hindi ko siguro kumbaga hindi mabayaran ng pera. Ang saya.
Thank you again, everyone. It was a short, but I think a good break. I hope you are fresh and ready for fruit picking. Before I pass the floor back to Ayla and Professor Jafari and the speakers, I just want to have a maybe less than 1 minute wrap up and comments from myself. I learned a lot today, and especially from all the speakers, Dr. Cole, and her nice focus on the resource management and the role of tourism. Tourism should not be a competitor for the resource, especially local resources. And water is a very important one. And a very important role on water as a resource and the management of a local resource with women that are using it for sanitation and for daily life and everyday life. So if this necessary or important resource of everyday life and the livelihood is used and utilized by tourism, and if there is a conflict in this. We had Marco that brought theory, more background to the field, and it's very important to see how we can get back up to the theory. Anne's presentation, who I just want to borrow a few sentences from Anne that I mentioned women and the role of women as the guardians of traditional knowledge and informal power of women, and a woman-led entrepreneurship, and how they are representing tourism industry and local industry. And I was really impressed by the examples and practical examples that we can use it as a role model for woman empowerment in tourism. And the last but not the least, I want to refer Dr. Rani and the project by government or public center. We learned from Dr. Randi how we can share lessons among different communities within the same country. And if these lessons can be shared, then people get more empowered, especially women. So thank you all, and I'm really waiting to hear from you again. Ayla, you can take back the floor that I still feel from you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kazem. So I think our chat box is actually fired up with some questions and insights regarding the presentation so far. So I guess to start off, let's try to address for some speaker-specific questions. So I guess there's one question for Dr. Stroma relating to your presentation about the post-pandemic scenario in tourism. So I guess one of our participants are asking for your advice as to how people can be convinced that there is really no going back to the unsustainable ways of tourism, that there is a need to rethink and to build a better future for tourism. How do we convince them that that's the case?
That's a very good question. Probably, one of those golden bullets that we'd all love to have if we knew how to convince people of the need. I think one way is by just really showing the examples of what it means when you don't have a diversified livelihood strategy. I think that there are some wonderful examples coming out of the South Pacific Islands, for example, where in Fiji, where enough of the community was still embedded in agriculture, that although they've become cash poor, they are still doing very well. In Labuan Bajo as well, they have gone back to barter. Unfortunately, quite a lot of what they're bartering is hunted, which is not great for the environment and stuff there. But in Fiji, enough people were in agriculture that they could absorb the labor back into agriculture. and people aren't going hungry where people remained in agriculture. And we can compare this with islands where nobody was in agriculture because it was all turned over to tourism, and they are faring so much worse. And if you combine the positive stories of what happens when you do have a diversified livelihood strategy with where you don't, and you map that against the knowledge we have got of what climate change is going to do. We did know a pandemic was on the way. They might not have, if you read the risk registers, pandemic was right up there, right? Along with rising sea levels, along with increased salination of water, along with longer droughts. You can take wherever your destination is, you can look at what the risk register is, you can shine it out there and say, we mustn't just do tourism. Yes, tourism, great. I love tourism. I've been in tourism all my life, but not at the expense of everything else. It cannot be purely tourism focused, or it is a disaster. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Stroma. So would Anne and Dr. Randi or anyone from the panel like to chime in, or are we good?
Dr. Randi?
Yeah, of course, I totally agree with Dr. Stroma. I hear a lot from people in my colleagues in the local governments and question about how do we help the tourism sector recover, and how. But for me, I think it's not about how tourism can help the economy recover. Tourism will come last. First we have to rebuild the economy, and then the economy will drive tourism recovery. So I think when we talk about transformative change or building forward better, we have to look beyond this discussion of building tourism forward better. As Stroma said, it has to be a holistic approach. So the perspective is about building everything holistically, and with that end in mind. Now, we're not going back. We have to do things better. We have to do our economy better. We have to do our relationships better.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Randi. Anne?
Well, I mostly agree with what Stroma and Dr. Randi has said. But another thing that comes to mind for me is just how we can make use of this pandemic, particularly to better the kind of ecotourism that's practiced in the country. I think this is a pet peeve for a lot of us. Ecotourism is largely just thrown around in the Philippines. I'm sorry, but so many Filipinos here, I'm sure you can relate. And it never really follows the principles of ecotourism. The moment that something is done outdoors, that's already ecotourism as far as the Philippines is concerned. But now that we're seeing all of the restrictions, the fact that outdoors is a better place to be in than indoors at this time, I think this really lends a unique opportunity for real ecotourism to thrive and flourish. Honestly, a lot of outdoor tourist destinations are ideal places to be. It's much better to be in the outdoors than indoors. But you need the right kinds of guidance, the right kinds of structures that people can follow, so that they could end up with an outdoor destination that's safe for people to be in and to go to. And right now, because there is a pandemic, there's a greater, how do I put it, less resistance to adoption. Because right now, it's more than just ecotourism, it's safety of people at large that we're talking about. So we should definitely use this time to have ecotourism flourish better in the places where they still don't. There was also one other thing that I wanted to add. I've completely forgotten it. But yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity there that should be used.
Okay, thank you, Anne. I think you'll remember it later on, and we can just add it up later.
Oh, well,
okay, there
I
you
think
go.
now I do remember it, now that you're talking. In the Philippines, there's also a huge lack of green spaces, and you see a lot of people clamoring for it right now. Unfortunately, we still don't have a lot of that at this time. So I hope that with this pandemic ongoing, and when it comes to post-recovery, a lot more emphasis could be placed in creating more green spaces for people to be in, because that's what people will be looking for in the years to come.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. So I guess that really points out to the idea that it's high time for us to rethink how we look at tourism, that it's actually part of a larger system, not just tourism industry, a profitable economic activity, right? So I guess going back to the topic on gender and empowerment, I guess I'm throwing this out to all our panelists. So I guess the question really is, how can women be more engaged in tourism in general? I think it's best to answer where we can start, right? When and how, because it's easier said than done that we want to promote women empowerment. But I guess, how do we start, and how can we encourage and engage more women in this aspect? Would you like to start, Dr. Stroma?
How to involve more women? I think women are very involved. I don't think we need to involve more women. I think women are super involved. I don't think they get a fair share of the pie. They're already set off by saying they're 54% of the workforce worldwide, right? But they are involved. How do we get them involved with work that is better valued? I think that means that we've got to look at the structures in society, and we've got to question the patriarchy, which says that what women do is less valued than what men do. That's a big ask, that's a big task, and we just have to chip away at it slowly but surely, and constantly remind power holders that we are of value. And what we do should be valued. What's going on in the UK at the moment is very interesting, because since we left the European Union, we've lost a lot of European Union workers. So now we have massive gaps in our hospitality industry. And all of a sudden, the power is in the hands of the workers to say, well, pay us a bit better and we might come back to work. If not, why should we? And it's those very, those hospitality workers who women who are very undervalued at present. You can earn more working in a supermarket than you can working in a restaurant or in a hotel. So they're leaving in their droves. Until they're properly valued. And that's the problem with tourism. It's not getting women involved. They are already involved. They just need to be better valued, in my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Strom. And I actually agree with that, because I've seen in the presentations a while ago, you can see that, yes, they are involved, but then in what kind of involvement are they actually engaged in? I mean, how are they valued as women? Are they just seen as accessories, just putting things together, but without really that application of that knowledge and experience that they have? So, Dr. Randi and Anne?
Yeah, I'd like to take something from what Stroma said earlier, that when we frame the engagement of women in tourism, we have to move beyond just saying, okay, 50% of the workforce are. So it's not about the jobs. It's about frame it in the perspective of empowerment and real improvements in the life conditions. I think for as I said earlier, for the formal sector, we have the data even here in the Philippines. Women are the larger proportion of workers in the travel trade sector, in particular departments of hospitality. You can see women with very high profiles in management positions. What I'm more concerned about are the women in the communities, the women at the far end, at the last mile of the value chain. That's where maybe the engagement isn't or needs to be revisited. And even in this pandemic, that's one of the concerns. We have a lot of development projects for working with women's groups, women economic empowerment projects. So the question is, with this shutdown of tourism in the Philippines, and tourism was offered as a way of improving their conditions, have they actually fallen back? Have we dropped back in terms of the progress that we made in these communities? And that's what I also meant when I said we need to have a really good look at the outcomes and then more long-term monitoring, even beyond like what happened. Like many of these projects end. So what happens after the projects end? And I think that's where the data collection needs to be done, and at the local government level and the national government level. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Totally
Randi.
agree.
Anne?
I just wanted to share something. Even if tourism formally has disappeared in the areas where we are, it actually still exists informally. Right now, it takes on the form of motorcyclists and cars passing by the roads and stopping by the roadside to buy food and go sightseeing. So it has not actually completely disappeared as far as the Philippines is concerned. In fact, there are more people going out now, more than ever, except in a very informal, unstructured way. And it's interesting how women are capitalizing on this. You're seeing a lot of shops, a lot of stalls popping out by the roadside, selling plants, offering food, offering other goods. And I can see that women are in the forefront of that, taking advantage of the situation, seeing how things could work, how they could recover in their own ways. But what usually stops them, or where it usually stops, is when they try to scale, or when they try to make their initiatives even bigger, right? Because there's lack of formal education, there's lack of investments and financing for the things that they want to do in response to changing market conditions. But I do believe that by strengthening women, even just women entrepreneurs, that's one way to empower women, get them in as members of councils, as members of governance, that will in turn really change the tide for how women are treated everywhere else. That should be the aim, just to have women in positions of power and in positions of governance. That's life-changing for a lot of girls. And the other good thing to consider now is to leverage on the equalizing power of technology, really. Because with technology, everyone, women included, have more access to quality trainings, quality content. It's easier more than ever to support women in their quest to learn more and to be better equipped in the work that they do. They don't need to go from the mountains all the way down to Metro Manila. They could just be on an online course, even if it means getting a tablet and staying by the roadside where there's internet. It's significantly better. And also when it comes to market reach, right? Just training them on how they could harness the market reach that technology has to offer when it comes to reaching millennials, when it comes to reaching bikers and motorcyclists. Something as simple as that could be very empowering.
Yes, thank you, Anne. So I guess what really this pandemic points us is the idea that we can this is actually the high time for us to rethink what tourism could look like after the pandemic. And I believe this is also the time for us to talk about gender again, because we always talk about sustainability, we always talk about pro-poor tourism, we all talk about all these themes. But then again, I think it's really important for us to once again bring the discussion up when it comes to women empowerment and gender. So I guess I guess the final question here that's been posted, and I guess it's apt for us to look into it. It's basically the prospects of women who want to be involved in tourism and hospitality. I mean, it's pointed out here, how can they increase their employability, and what kind of knowledge and skills should be strengthened by women so that they can actually have a fighting chance to be part of a higher level or greatly skilled types of jobs. So Dr. Stroma?
Oh, me again first. Upskilling, I'm guessing, is the question. All right, where do women, and I think that Anne has already partly answered that. I mean, we can all learn so much so easily. in a theoretical sense, certainly, you know, the education is there, but I think that it's also getting practical hands-on experience in anything. And I think that somebody said earlier about how multifaceted tourism is, right? So I don't think that you have to get your hands-on experience in anything that comes under the rubrics of tourism, right? You just get your hands-on experience, as well as you can get your theoretical knowledge very easily online, but you need that hands-on experience in order to get that step on that first job. And one thing is belief in self. There's a lot of studies which show that women tend to underplay their skills and their power, right? Whereas men overplay what they so they do better in interviews because men can brag and they can show off and be so great and make their feathers flutter, and all right, whereas women tend to underplay themselves. So it's about playing up what you've got. It's that little bit of experience and then making a big deal out of it and believing in yourself, right? So that's where I think it's critical. It is self-belief and self-esteem, and I think we can all help each other with that. Women can, in particular, can help other women. You know, befriend another woman who you aspire to being, and as women who have got there, mentor the younger women, the less secure, the less women who don't have that self-belief, the shyer, the more restrained women, you know, show them how it is you take power.
Thank you, Dr. Stroma. Actually, I felt the power of Dr. Stroma's message. I feel like I'm now in like a workshop for empowerment, and yeah, I mean, I can feel it, right? That's girl power right there. So I'm just very proud to be a woman, actually. Okay, so anyway, to chime in, Dr. Randi and Anne. I think Dr. Randi wants to be the last.
No, very quick. There's nothing much more to add to that. I think if someone wants to be strategic about it, okay, then we think about it also in terms of what Stroma is saying. We want to build forward better. So there are many opportunities for that next normal, or that better future, which are not necessarily in tourism. Okay, so there are many new things we're talking about. There are many new activities that are going to be part of that new economy, and those are the new skills, the new entrepreneurial opportunities that are going to be available for women and men. And the question is, how do we provide a space for women? So, and how do we provide an institution so that women can help each other and lift each other up? So that's it.
Okay. Anne, anything else before we pass on to Dr. Jafari?
I think a lot has already been said, and I'd love to end with what Dr. Strong has already said. I really felt that one too.
Okay,
yeah.
go ahead.
I will always have something to add, but should I still? It just reminded me of a women's organization that was recently built near us. They started off really as just separated groups of women who do not like being outside of their homes and just like preparing food. And we started talking, and they realized that other people could enjoy the food that they are preparing. And there are many ways that they could improve on it and create something unique out of it. So later on, they already had value-add products that they were selling to other groups. And later on, they started participating in tourism-related initiatives and education activities. And this was at a time when women were still not allowed to take key roles in the tribe. But fast forward 3 years later, they already are the woman-led organization is the official people's organization of this tribe. because they banded together and just helped each other flourish. The members are now in the regional tribal council, already the lead in the school. And now more women are really stepping up to take part in decision making. So it's just amazing how they were able to find each other and really empower each other to do more for their communities. And even in the very difficult circumstances, when we're talking about land speculators, criminals, it shows the power of women communities, because you talk to one of these ladies, they talk to each other, and before you know it, you have a reach of 30, 40 wives and mothers. And because there's a lot of them and they're talking to each other, it doesn't feel like they're too alone when they're trying to overcome challenges. So it's just interesting because the power of women banding together it doesn't just showcase when you're fighting for women's rights. There are manifestations when it comes to how land is managed, when it comes to how water is managed, all of these things born simply out of empowering women.
Okay, thank you, Anne. And I guess for the final remarks, I would like to pass it on to Professor Jafari.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kazem always leaves the hard part of the work for me. This has been a long and engaging discussion. We are already close to 2 hours, and it seems to go on for a while. So we are beyond the time of scheduled time, and I'm not going to lengthen it further. We had very nice presentations. Thank you very much to each and every one of you, and a very nice summary by Dr. Kazem just before the discussion began of highlighting to the strong points of each of the presentations. Let us remind ourselves that what the theme of the webinar was. Women in tourism, challenges and opportunities. And I like the last word most, opportunities. It's a positive thing to have in mind when we are discussing. But sometimes when we get to certain topics, it may become a sort of a struggle. You know, I like myself the word empowerment, and I believe in it. And we are all talking about empowerment of community and host community, etc. But when we say empowering women, then it means somebody should empower them. It becomes subject and object. And I think we should be moving beyond that point of just using it in that sense of empowering. Who is supposed to empower women? They have already empowered themselves. So that really doesn't sit too well with me. Maybe the way we put it, the concept is perfect, but the way we put it, it comes as to subject and object, which is not the case, should not be the case, and was not the case in this presentation. So I think instead of empowerment, we should be talking about engagement. Are women engaged in tourism? We answered that question. Right at the beginning said we have 54% of the workforce in tourism is women. So that's engagement. That's already here. It has already happened and it's growing. I also added before even Ella talked that the population of students studying hospitality and tourism has shifted in favor of women. So the shift has taken place in quality and quantity. What is tourism after all? Tourism is also the art of hospitality. Hospitality, it means guest, host and guest. And the transaction is caring between host and guest. Now the issue could be, are women more caring, more fit for the industry? And I want to say yes. They have shown that they really care and they do it with passion, with engagement. I'm thinking of other professions that women in its shine, and we are experience that profession right now, nursing. Who is doing all the nursing and all the caring? It's women. And tourism is a kind of caring. Nurses are caring to repair bodies, and tourism people are caring to repair mind on vacation, on holidays, etc. So it's about caring, give and take, host and guest. And passion was mentioned by more than one of you. The passion is in the core of it. We are in the service. We are a service industry. We are not a product industry. And again, service means delivery of hospitality, and then who is doing it better. So I think, again, I don't want to make a long discussion, follow a long discussion with the long conclusion. Let the conclusion is a few words. So let's engagement be the discourse rather than empowerment, because the empowerment has already taken place. Let women's engagement and passion in hospitality speak for itself. It is already speaking for itself. So the shine is coming through, and that is my final words.
Thank you, Jafar. It was very enlightening. The word engagement is really thoughtful. I had a feeling that before we end this session, I don't want to challenge you, but I really want to ask you, Jafar, that I got a personal feeling that is a kind of discussion that brought up competition between man and woman. To me, they are not the same. They are different, and they are complementary. So the combination of man and woman build a destination, and the destination cannot be a real destination or tourist destination without either side, man and woman. But how we can just narrow the gap in this gender, male, female competition and make it more complementary? So is there a way that we should think of job distribution, or when you say to engage, are there some zoning, for example? We can say, okay, this is a male zone and this is female zone. It's just not only to you, to all the speakers, but I want to ask you first.
And if we are talking about social engineering, and I think that I'm not qualified to talk about social engineering or shifting the powerhouses or attitude. I think my last words speak for itself. Let the shine come through, and the shine is coming through. Women have shown themselves, and they're shining in the field. And the balance is changing, or has already changed in the sheer number of people engaged in tourism and in the quality that they deliver. That is my position. I'm not going to get into social engineering.
Thank you. And also I see in the chat that Dr. Stroma, says we have no complementary power. Yes, so how we can then combine or join forces and come up with this, let's say, more complete destination in terms of functionality. Because why women, for example, don't lead and say what man should do? It's all about this functionality and how it works. If there is a distribution of job, it should be also decided by the society, regardless of the gender. So let me ask Dr. Cole, what is your answer?
I don't really have an answer to how to overturn patriarchy. But what I do know is the pandemic has made it worse. I do know that women have, more men have died, but far more women have suffered. that rates of gender-based violence have increased massively, that more women have been put in more precarious positions, despite the fact that we've been the nurses caring, we've been offering all those things that Jafar correctly says that we do, but it's this valuing of it. And I think that when you start valuing women, then that's when you will start creating that equality, which is so critical to move forward. I don't think you can socially engineer it, just as Jafar says. I think that it, but we have got to speed it up. And there are many ways we can speed it up. Family-friendly policies within the workplace would be a start. Listening to women's voices, putting women banding together and getting on the councils, more training in how to take your power for women, more mentoring for women. There's lots of ways which, we can speed up the change, which hasn't happened yet. Women might be shining in some lovely examples, and being one of them, but that doesn't mean to say that women have equality or anything close to it. And gender equality, if you look at all the data, has gone backwards during the pandemic.
Perfect, Dr. Cole. I really believe on education, and I think one of the most or fastest shortcut is education. And if we have enough education and training, then it will shorten the
on behalf of tourism, inequality is in all fields, not just tourism.
Yeah, I believe so. So, and maybe because our focus is tourism, we are just we are talking about tourism and gender or inequality. But and tourism itself is an interdisciplinary field that it's a crossroad of many fields. I know, Jafar, you are anthropologist, but I am originally an economist and I came to tourism. So maybe the way that you and me think are different, but we are talking about the same thing with different point of view. Thank you very much. I think it's going to be the end of this session because we have passed our 90 minutes, maybe more than 30 minutes. It was very fruitful meeting. I have a good news. We have, especially for those who join SCoT for the first time, and they're going to email us. We get a lot of emails about past webinars and how they can access it. So our SCoT team have prepared a video for you that after that, I want you to stay a minute with me and we do a small work together. So before that, let me share the video. Have the voice. So maybe you're a teacher and you want to ask your students or give them active learning or online field study please feel free to use it. And if you're interested in different topics, the video library is accessible for all, and you can easily find your video. I'm going to also show the library in another screen, if you let me. So what I like everybody to do is please utilize this collection of the videos that is the result of 1 year of SCoT communication with communities around the world, and all is ready for you to use. All you need to do is just go to youtube.com/SCoT webinars and subscribe and click the button for notifications that when we upload the new videos, you have a notification automatically. A big thank to our speakers and the moderator, and especially Professor Jafari, who sacrificed his whole night. It should be 3 a.m. in your local time, Jafar, am I right?
4 now, yes.
It's 4, okay, then there is no more night. So good morning to you, and thank you very much. In Japanese, we can say utsukare-sama. And I would like to thank our SCoT team who are behind this screen, and they arranged all these works. So Hira is representing them, and she is here. Thank you all, and we are looking forward to see you in our next SCoT webinars. Thank you very much. And I think, Ayla, you have a link for a survey?
Yes, sir. So I'm posting here a quick evaluation survey for this webinar. So maybe, there you go. I hope you can access it. So yeah, just feel free to share with us your thoughts about this topic. And again, hopefully we can continue in discussing this issue, because I know a lot of us are actually still into it. I mean, there's still 100+ participants, even if we've exceeded the 1.5 hour time allotment. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Randi, Anne, and Dr. Stroma for accommodating our request. And we hope to look forward, we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for those who are watching us on YouTube. So let's not forget them, that they are who because they're
Nice meeting you virtually, Dr. Stroma.
Lovely to meet you too. Thank you for inviting me.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Ayla. Thank you. Good. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Dr. Stroma.
Let's be in touch.
Yes, thank you.